In the land of Uz, under the vast blue skies, I, Job, lived surrounded by the blessings of a rich life. My lands were fertile, stretching out like a lush green carpet under the sun that turned wheat golden and ripened the grapes. I was known not just for my wealth, but for how I managed it. I had thousands of sheep that covered the hills like clouds before a rainstorm, camels that formed caravans crossing the deserts, donkeys, and oxen that plowed the firm earth, all proof of my hard work and devotion. At the heart of my home, love and faith were the foundation of every day. My wife, a woman of unwavering faith, and my 10 children, whose laughter filled our halls, were my greatest treasures. At dawn, I'd offer sacrifices for each of them, thinking maybe in their young, joyful hearts, they might sin and curse God in their thoughts. This was my way of keeping not just my own soul pure but also those God entrusted to me. My faith was known across the land, as vast as my properties. Travelers passing through my land spoke of a man who feared God and shunned evil. In every deal, every harvest, every interaction with my servants, I aimed to reflect that reverence. Not because I feared retribution, but because I recognized the source of all my fortune and happiness. It was a life marked by a rare harmony between earthly gifts and heavenly spirituality. I lived each day fully, aware of the many blessings, yet always prepared for testing, knowing that true faith is shaped not only in abundance but in adversity. Still, in those peaceful days, I could hardly imagine the challenges that fate, with divine permission, was about to unfold before me. Back then, when the earth was still filled with the breath of angels and the sky opened with divine counsel, a conversation took place in the heavens, unknown to me in my limited humanity. It was a dialogue between the Creator of all things and Satan, the adversary, whose gaze roams the earth seeking the ruin of hearts turned towards God. "Have you seen my servant Job?" asked the Lord in a voice that was both storm and breeze. "There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Like the wind that blows where it pleases," crafty Satan replied, "does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you put a hedge around him, his household, and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his flocks and lands have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." To this cruel provocation, as harsh as the waterless desert, the Lord granted permission, but with a provision that spared the spark of my life. "Everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself, do not lay a finger." So spoke the Lord, and so the test of my faith was set. Unaware of the celestial events shaping my fate, I was just living my life, not realizing that every step I took, every smile I shared with my family, every prayer I sent up like incense, was now under the harsh scrutiny of an impending trial. My heart, steadfast in faith, was about to be tested not by ordinary fire, but by the very breath of the adversary, in a storm that would ravage not just the land beneath my feet but everything I had known as blessing and peace. It was a day like any other in Uz, the sun rising with the promise of another day of work and blessing. But what unfolded seemed more like the furious whims of a nightmare than any reality my faithful heart could comprehend. First, a messenger arrived, breathless and dusty, with news that cut deep. The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby when the Sabaeans attacked and took them all. The servants were slain by the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you this. No sooner had he finished than another appeared, his words hitting me like a storm. Fire from God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you this. I was still trying to wrap my head around these losses when another messenger appeared, his face etched with despair. "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties, swept down on your camels and took them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you this." Yet, the greatest tragedy was still to come. A 4th messenger arrived, his clothes torn and his face marked by pain. "Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them and they are dead, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you this." Each piece of news was a blow, each word a dagger to my heart. I fell to my knees, my robe torn in mourning, dust rising around me as I worshipped. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away, may the name of the Lord be praised. These words weren't a surrender to despair, but a cry of faith in the midst of the storm. In the depths of my being, despite the darkness enveloping me, I chose not to curse God, but to worship Him, for even in the darkest shadows, I knew the light of His presence would never leave me. As I was still submerged in the deep sea of mourning for my losses, a new trial descended upon me, one so cruel and painful it seemed to crush the last vestiges of peace from my body and soul. I was afflicted, not just in spirit, but in flesh, with agonizing sores that erupted across my skin like flames from an unseen fire. It felt like every inch of my skin was being consumed by relentless burning. The sores, red and oozing, covered me from head to toe, offering no refuge or comfort. Sitting on a pile of ashes, I grabbed a piece of broken pottery and used it to scrape the misery off my skin, trying somehow to ease the unending torment. The people who used to greet me on the streets now averted their eyes and whispered to each other. I, once a pillar of strength and faith, was now seen as a broken man, marked by disgrace and divine abandonment. The loneliness of this new reality weighed on me as heavily as the illness itself. Friends distanced themselves, and even those who stayed looked at me with a mix of pity and discomfort. In the silence of these dark days, as I gazed at the sky, I sought not just relief from my pain, but also understanding. Why was I, a faithful servant, subjected to such affliction? What was in my faith that needed to be refined by such severe tribulation? Despite everything, deep within my shattered heart and broken body, I maintained a slender thread of faith. I refused to let bitterness poison my soul. Instead, I cried out in my misery, not with words of cursing, but with pleas from a man who, though devastated, still recognized God as the only source of salvation and hope. This was my refuge, even when all other lights seemed to go out. At the height of my suffering, when loneliness intertwined with the physical pain that consumed me, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, my longtime friends, arrived. They came from distant lands, drawn by the news of my misfortune. When they saw me from afar, they barely recognized me. Such was the devastation afflicting me, they tore their clothes and threw dust into the air, a sign of mourning and shock, before sitting down with me on the ashes. For 7 days and 7 nights, they stayed by my side in silence, my torment so great that words seemed inadequate. I valued this quiet solidarity, hoping that their words would eventually bring the comfort my soul so desperately craved. However, when they finally broke the silence, their voices did not bring the consolation I had hoped for. Eliphaz, the eldest, began by suggesting that my suffering might be divine correction for hidden sins. "Has anyone ever perished being innocent?" he asked, implying that the extent of my suffering was a reflection of unconfessed guilt. Bildad followed, arguing that if my children had died, it must have been due to their wickedness, and that I should seek God to restore my life. Zophar then added his own words, claiming that perhaps I deserved even worse, and that my apparent righteousness was insufficient in the eyes of the Almighty. Every word they spoke, though filled with concern, cut deeper than the sores on my skin. Instead of relief, their speeches added weight to my already burdened heart. The accusation that my suffering was the result of some hidden moral failure ignited my spirit. Amidst the pain and despair, I found myself forced to defend my integrity, maintaining my innocence against a tide of poorly founded judgments. So, amidst the ruins of my life, with friends who had become accusers, I fought not just physical pain but also the emotional isolation their words caused. With every argument they made, I clung tighter to my faith, resisting the urge to give in to despair, keeping my integrity intact before God and men. As the days dragged on under the scorching sun and the nights fell like a cold blanket over the earth, the dialogue between me and my friends deepened and grew more complex. We were immersed in a debate not just about my suffering, but about the very foundations of divine justice and human destiny. Eliphaz, with his deep voice and piercing gaze, insisted that God rewards righteousness and punishes wickedness, and that my misfortune should be seen as a correction, a call to repentance. See, God doesn't trust his servants and charges his angels with error. How much more those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundations are in the dust," he exclaimed, trying to shape my pain into a divine lesson. Bildad, ever pragmatic, argued that the world operates under a just order, where each person receives according to their deeds. If your children sinned against him, he delivered them into the power of their transgression, he said, looking me straight in the eyes, as if trying to elicit a confession from me. Zophar, no less relentless, questioned the depth of my search for wisdom and justice. "Do you know how God commands the clouds, how he makes the thunder of his canopy resound?" he asked, suggesting that my understanding of God's ways was as shallow as the soil covering an ungerminated seed. I, however, raised my voice, not in defiance, but in desperation for enlightenment. "Even now, my witness is in heaven, my advocate is on high. My friends scorn me, my eyes pour out tears to God," I responded, my voice heavy with emotion. I argued not only for my innocence but also for a vision of a God that transcends our simplistic understanding of justice. "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me, if you understand," I recalled the words that would later be spoken by the Creator himself. In the whirlwind of this theological debate, my words were pleas for an answer, not just for my condition, but for the eternal mystery of human suffering under divine governance. This clash between a faith-seeking understanding and a reason that fails to console became the core of our long dispute. I was not only defending my integrity but also trying to touch the heart of a greater mystery, the divine purpose behind the suffering that afflicts the just and shakes the heavens. At the heart of our endless discussions with my friends, my soul swung between anguish and steadfastness. Their words, sharp as razors, insisted on a worldview where suffering was the inevitable punishment for hidden sin. But amid the whirlwind of pain and despair, a flame of resistance burned within me. "I will maintain my integrity and not let it go," I declared with a voice trembling yet saturated with conviction. "My heart does not reproach any of my days. Until I breathe my last, I will not remove my honesty." With these words, I stood up not just against my friend's accusations but also against the temptation to succumb to despair. My defense was not just a series of well-crafted arguments, it was a cry from the depths of my soul, a testament to my life lived in the presence of God. "So far, my tongue has spoken the truth, and my lips detest wickedness," I reinforced, facing the puzzled looks of Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Each word I spoke aimed to repel the shadow of doubt they tried to cast upon me. At the same time, my refusal to curse God was the true measure of my faith. Despite all my losses, the sores on my body, the desolation in my soul, I chose not to attribute malice or injustice to God. "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him," I declared with a mix of pain and devotion. This was the paradox of my faith. Even when it seemed like God had become my adversary, I continued to see him as my savior. The pressure from my friends was intense. They seemed determined to make me confess a non-existent guilt or to question divine justice. But each of their attempts only strengthened my commitment to stand firm in the truth I knew. I was surrounded not just by the shadows of adversity but also by the opportunity to testify about the incomprehensible yet absolutely just nature of God. This defense, however, was not a shield against vulnerability. In every argument, every defense, I exposed my broken heart, my shaken hope, but never destroyed. I was facing not just my friends but the silence of the heavens, waiting for an answer, a redemption, an echo of my faith in the infinite. And in this waiting, my defense became more than words, it transformed into a testament of my journey through the valley of the shadow of death, holding firm to the promise of a dawn not yet seen. While my friends and I were tangled up in a web of accusations and defenses, a new voice cut through the tension like a sharp blade. It was Elihu, the youngest among us, who had been silently watching the argument unfold with increasingly tense patience. His respect for our age had kept him quiet, but the strength of his conviction finally broke through. Elihu started speaking with an energy that was a stark contrast to the exhaustion of our previous debates. "I'm bursting with words," he said, his voice vibrating with a mix of respect and reproach. "The spirit within me compels me." It was clear he felt a responsibility, perhaps even a divine one, to correct both my friends and me. He criticized my friends not for their faith, but for their failure to find the right answer, for not proving their accusation that my suffering was a punishment for hidden sin. You found no wisdom here, he chastised, addressing them with palpable disdain for the superficiality of their conclusions. Then, he turned to me with equally sharp severity. Elihu challenged my self-righteousness, my insistence on my innocence almost to the point of justifying myself rather than God. Job speaks without knowledge, his words lack wisdom, he declared, questioning my understanding of the nature of God and his ways. But Elihu didn't stop at rebukes. He also introduced a perspective that broadened the scope of our discussion beyond punishment and reward. He spoke of God's greatness, his power and justice, which cannot be fully understood or measured by human limits. God is greater than man. Why do you quarrel with him because he does not answer every word of man? He asked, suggesting that divine justice operates on a plane that transcends our finite understanding. Elihu's words served as both a relief and a challenge. They cut through the heavy air of our prolonged conflict, bringing a breath of fresh perspective that considered not only God's justice but also his sovereignty and our humble position before him. As he spoke, I felt the layers of my own defense being challenged and also strengthened, preparing my spirit for the final encounter that was yet to come. Elihu's youthful voice echoed like the prelude to distant thunder, heralding the arrival of a greater and more revealing storm. Amid the turmoil of words and the depth of my distress, the sky above me began to swirl with an inexplicable force. A whirlwind formed, grand and terrifying, a manifestation of power that made the ground beneath my feet tremble and the air around me vibrate with the voice of the Almighty. God was responding, not in silence or through intermediaries, but directly to me, Job, a man wrapped in suffering and surrounded by unanswered questions. Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? God's voice boomed from the whirlwind, imposing and filled with majesty. I, who had cried out for answers, for a sign of justice or explanation, now found myself overwhelmed by a presence that transcended any human expectation. God then began to question me, a series of inquiries that not only demonstrated his infinite wisdom but also the vastness of his creation. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me, if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? Each question thundered, echoing the truth that the order of the universe was beyond my grasp. As the Lord spoke about the gates of death, the dwelling of light, the laws of the heavens, and the foundations of the earth, my understanding of all I thought I knew began to unravel. I was being led into a place of deep humility, recognizing that my vision was limited, my understanding like a drop in a vast ocean. Does the prey for the lioness satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in a thicket? The Lord continued, illustrating his provision and care for all creatures, great and small. The magnitude of his management of life and death, of order and chaos, was revealed to me, not as a judgment, but as an invitation to reverence and awe. As the voice of the whirlwind rose and fell, a reverent silence settled in my soul. I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. I finally responded, my voice a fragile whisper before divine power. My defense, once raised with so much conviction, now gave way to an admission of my own finiteness and a surrender to the wisdom of God who governs the cosmos with unfathomable justice. In this deepest of encounters, the majesty and power of God not only answered my questions with more questions but revealed a broader picture, a purpose and presence that enveloped me and transcended any pain or despair I had known. I was at once humbled and uplifted, undone and remade by the encounter with the divine. Following the whirlwind of divine questions and my humble submission to the vastness of God's knowledge, a new chapter unfolded in my life, marked by a restoration as wonderful as it was unexpected. The darkness of the trials I had endured began to give way to the light of new hope and renewal. God, in his infinite mercy and justice, began to restore everything that had been taken from me. It was a process that transcended simple restitution. It was a multiplication and a blessing that reflected the depth of divine love. My lands, once desolate and silent, began to buzz with activity and fecundity again. Sheep, camels, donkeys, and oxen, in numbers that doubled those I had before, filled the vast fields stretching under the blue sky once more. But more precious than the restitution of property was the return of familial joy. God blessed me with new children, 7 sons and 3 daughters, each bringing a measure of light and joy that seemed eternally lost. Watching them play and grow was a constant reminder that even the greatest losses can be followed by unimaginable blessings. With my family and wealth restored, my home once again became a place of gathering and celebration. The same friends who had once debated with me about the meaning of suffering now gathered around my table, witnessing the generosity of a God who rewards the persistence of faith and humility before the divine. My life, filled with losses and gains, suffering and salvation, now reflected a deeper truth about the nature of God and human destiny. Every day I lived was a testament to my journey through the shadows of doubt and despair to the light of understanding and peace. The community, seeing my restoration, spoke not just of my renewed fortune but of the character of a man who, despite the worst adversities, never ceased to seek the face of God. Thus, in the tranquility of my restored days and the joy of my expanded family, I found a new life marked not just by what was restored in material terms but by what was transformed in my spirit. Patience and humility, forged in the fire of trials, became the true riches that no adversity could diminish or destroy. This redemption, deeper than the simple recovery of lost goods, was the true victory of my enduring faith. And so, my dear viewers, we close another thrilling journey through the stories that shape our faith and spirit. Today, we've experienced together the saga of Job, an example of faith and resilience. If you felt inspired by this story, and want to continue exploring the wonders and mysteries of the scriptures with us, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss anything. Leave your comment sharing your reflections and share the video with others who might also find inspiration. Until next time, with more stories that touch the heart and strengthen the faith.